welcome to the education panel. My name is Sarah Keene, and I'm the current president of the League of Women Voters, and I want to extend a warm welcome to all of you guys that brave the cold to get out of here and come hear about this really important topic. Not only am I the president of the League of Women Voters, but I'm also a school counselor in the Springdale Public Schools, so this is an issue that is personal for me as well. I want to take a moment and recognize any of our elected officials that are in the audience. If you would please stand. So thank you all for being here and taking time out of your busy schedules to come and be a part of this discussion as well. I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Carol Witter, who's going to kind of give us the rundown of how this is going to work.
Well, hello and welcome, and thanks for coming out. I don't know, Tracy Ann Nelson is not here. I hope she's not having car trouble or anything, so we'll keep our fingers crossed. So I'm going to go ahead and start with the introduction of the panel, and I'm so grateful for all the people that agreed to be on the panel. First of all, I'd like to introduce Dr. John L. Colbert, and he's been an educator for 43 years, 40 of those in the Fayetteville Public Schools and 3 in Fort Smith. And he's currently serving as superintendent of Fayetteville Public Schools. And I have to just take a point of personal privilege. I'm so excited. We were classmates. We student taught with the same supervising teacher, Miss Donna Lorch. Yes, and we also, served in Special Olympics and were special ed teachers together. So I'm extremely excited and happy that he is superintendent. He's been very active in his community and many professional organizations and won many awards. And so we're very grateful for Dr. John L. Colbert for being here. Next, I'd like to introduce Ms. Anna Ballou. She teaches French, and she's the sponsor of the French National Honor Society. For 18 years, she's taught various levels of French in Fayetteville, and she's served in a variety of leadership programs. She's also the current president of Fayetteville Education Association, and she's also a member of the American Association of Teachers of French and the Arkansas Foreign Language Association. And she's very active with her students and takes them to trips in France. Okay, so here. I'm very pleased to have Megan Godfrey here. Miss Megan Godfrey is our current representative, right? You're a representative, yes. So, okay, she is a 2002 Springdale High School graduate. She went to study Spanish and political science at the University of Arkansas, and then she started a teaching career in the inner city in Los Angeles. And then she got her master's degree from Loyola Marymount University. After 2 years in the LEA, Representative Godfrey moved to Springdale and taught in Springdale and as an ESL coordinator. And we're just so happy to have you here. Thank you. Next, I would like to introduce Elizabeth Lyon-Bailey. She's an independent researcher and education blogger. She was formerly a concertmaster of Fort Smith Symphony and Arkansas Philharmonic. And she came from 15 years of professional orchestral experience. She had a traumatic experience teaching in the unregulated world of open enrollment charter schools, so she quit teaching and she started advocating for public awareness of education issues and now currently blogs. And last but not least, Ms. Elizabeth Johnson, we're so happy to have you here, is from Michoacan, Mexico. Did I pronounce that correctly? In her country, she obtained a law degree and as a teacher in multicultural education, specialized in social sciences. Resident of this country for 4 years, she arrived in Northwest Arkansas, was involved with community and social causes. She was the director of family engagement for Root Ed in Northwest Arkansas. Now she continues her community service as Northwest Programs Assistant as a nonprofit organization, Arkansas United. So at this point, I will turn this over to Bill Kopsky, who will be our moderator, and he will take charge. Thank you so much, everyone.
You bet.
I'm with the Arkansas Public Policy Panel and the Arkansas Citizens First Congress, and for those of you that don't know us, we do organizing work across the state around issues that communities that we work in select, and one of the primary issues of our members is improving quality public education. And so we've done a lot of work over the years on that, and with lots of partners, many of whom are in the room. And so I'm just going to kind of facilitate a conversation, and we're going to try to turn this as conversational as we can, so that it's not us sitting here and giving you a series of speeches, but trying to have a conversation. And we're going to talk for a while, and then there'll be an opportunity after we get going for a bit for you guys to ask questions. And for that, we're going to have Nick here in the front is going to pass out some cards. You can send cards with questions up, and also the league folks will be passing out cards. So we'll work questions into the conversation. And it should be great. I'm really excited. Let's get one more round for our panel of expert educators. It's an honor to be here with them. Since Tracy Ann is not here, and she was supposed to sort of give a general overview of kind of some of the education issues that we see at the state level, I might just take a stab at starting the conversation with that, and then work into the panel with some questions. So one of the things at the state level, I think you could summarize some of the education struggles with a couple of key buckets. The biggest and most pressing bucket right now would be the state budget. The legislature is in, and Governor Hutchinson has proposed a budget. The legislature has proposed what they consider to be adequate funding. Adequacy in terms of funding has been diminishing over the past 6 years, in part because they're looking for funding to put into tax cuts and other places in the budget. And so that's one thing that we're concerned about at the state level, is making sure that we really are maintaining our commitment to education. A lot of you might not know this, but Arkansas actually over the past 15 years, since 2003, has had the fastest improving education system in the country. And we don't often pat ourselves in the back in Arkansas, especially around education. And don't get me wrong, we're still 43rd, but we were 49th. And we're on the right trajectory. And if you look at what really drove that pace of improvement over the past 15 years, it was the Lakeview decision, where the Supreme Court ruled our system of education unconstitutionally inadequate and inept, and ordered the legislature to do something about it. And a bipartisan consensus came together, led by Governor Huckabee and the Democrats who controlled the legislature at the time. And they put together a package of research-based reforms that really radically improved our curriculum, our services and help for kids with special needs or kids who are in poverty. And then they also put in a significant amount of new revenue into the education system. And under that, we have really taken off and are making more progress, faster progress than any other state in the country. What we're seeing in the past couple of years is that start to slow down. And so and we'll get into some of the reasons why that may be as we get into the panel conversation. But sort of making sure we maintain that commitment to adequacy is one, and that's tied to both policy in the schools, but also the budget. Another area that we're seeing around education is continuing to push on those areas around research-based reforms. And so we're working with our partners at Advocates for Children and Families, for example, to push expanded resources to bring more people into the pre-K program in the state, and also to improve the quality of our pre-K programs in Arkansas. We're looking for funding to expand after-school and summer programs, because there's mountains and mountains of evidence that will improve education. Improving discipline policy, improving teacher quality, improving nutrition and other services. Shockingly, hungry kids don't learn well. And so there's a set of research-proven strategies that there's near universal consensus would improve education. And actually, if you did get it, it would be helpful. There was a flyer that we have, and this is a joint statement from several education advocacy organizations that was on the front table. And we basically bucket what we think has broad consensus among almost every researcher out there. And those consensus are really boiled into 4 points. The first is student-centered learning environments, so like individual learning plans, pre-K, that sort of program. Attracting, developing, supporting, and retaining high-quality teachers and administrators. Teachers have been under attack around the country and in Arkansas, unfortunately, in recent years, and we're not paying them what we should, and we're not giving them the support that they need. The third area is infrastructure and resources that students need to excel. These recommendations in this report, they cost money. Many legislators are looking for the one single silver bullet that's free, and in hundreds of years of education policy research, no one has found the free silver bullet. No one's even found an expensive silver bullet. There's a host of reforms that we need to do, and they take resources to do. In Arkansas, again, it's made progress there, but our facilities, if you tour across the state, you'll still see wild disparities in facilities. As much as we're trying to do around teacher salary now, the disparity between the poorest districts and the richest districts in teacher salary is wider now than it was when the Supreme Court ruled on Lakeview in 2003. And then the last bucket that we kind of highlight of places where, again, broad consensus that it would help is shared accountability for all parties in the education system. And we'll get into that later. Right now, there's accountability for some and not so much accountability for others is our perspective. So part of what we see as the education landscape is trying to focus policymakers' attention on these areas where this broad consensus happens. The last thing that I'm going to say about sort of framing the statewide debate is there's another reform effort being pushed that doesn't have the research behind it, and that is frankly a diversion away from where the research would lead us, and that is the effort to privatize. And so in the past several legislative sessions, you've seen bills to allow more unfettered charter school expansion, voucher programs for private schools, some of which are not even accredited. And what we say is that we're not opposed to all charter schools by any means, but what we say is that the research is just simply not there to support that as a fix for our education woes. It's just not there. And that those solutions come with other ancillary costs. They have been driving inequity. They sometimes don't perform any better, or oftentimes perform worse than the traditional public schools. There's a whole host of challenges. Again, we'll get into some of that as we have the conversation today. But the biggest thing that frustrates us is that we view it also as a giant distraction away from the areas where there is near universal consensus. The stuff on this sheet here, if we would just have the political will to do these, every child in Arkansas would benefit tomorrow. There's almost no doubt among any educator in the country and education researcher around that fact. And you can read in there how many different organizations have come to nearly the exact same conclusions with the exact same lists. And so that's sort of how I would frame the education issues as we face the state, is trying to focus on where there's the research, trying to make sure we have adequate resources to do that, and trying to keep the attention on those things as the distractions of privatization come to the fore with many, many resources pushing behind them. So how's that for an opening frame? Okay. So why don't we start this? And what I'd like to start, if we could, with our superintendent, because I think you guys are sort of the front line of where policy and reality collide. And if you would, to start by, and he's going to need a microphone, so thank you. Just share with us what you see that's going well, actually. Let's start on a positive note. What's going well in your school district and you see happening across the state? And let others chime in. Let's just see if we can talk about what we see that should make us feel good for a minute.
Well, the first thing that I see that's going very well is the fact that we're coming together as a state, and we are addressing the issues that is facing education. And we realize that legislators and all, we have to talk about those issues and really address those. And as we continue to address the issues coming before us, especially those dealing with meeting the needs of our students as a whole, providing programs that is making a difference. And I take pride in the fact that we not only try to reach the high students, but we're talking about reaching every student who is in the public system. And we realize that, the students do not all come to us at the same level. But with the teachers and the administrators, they are meeting those needs, taking those kids where they are, and making sure that they are doing well. And as we continue to look at the achievement gap, and that's to measure about how we are doing. And as we look at the achievement gap, yes, it's still there, but it's closing. And that is basically because of the fact that we are looking at each student as an individual. And with the new initiative of personalized learning, that initiative is helping us to meet the needs of individual students. Again, because we know as educators that every student is not at the same level. And then as we continue to look at the different programs, CTE is a big initiative in the schools now that we are real proud of, because we know that every student is not going to go to college.
Tell us what CTE is for those of us that...
Career technical education there. Because of the fact that we as educators, my educators here, we realize that we have to know that every student is not going to go to college. And even some of the bright students, they were saying, hey, I want to find a career that I can go into right away after I graduate from high school. So that is a big push that we see today, and we're trying to meet those needs. In order for us to really be successful with the CTE programs, we have to be out in the community, giving the different companies to serve as, provide internship for their students so that they can be ready to go into the workforce. And so therefore, we're trying to not just look at our advanced students, getting them ready for college, but also getting ready to make sure that every student can find their niche and do well, and be it going out into becoming a welder or becoming a truck driver, and all those professions are needed. And so therefore we are preparing students across the board these days in order to get them ready for the society and be productive workers.
That's great. Again, there's just mountains of evidence that supports individual learning. So why don't I pitch to Anna? You're actually in the school every day with students. So what do you see that's going well and that's encouraging you right now?
Well, I would like to say some of the same things, I think, as Dr. Colbert. I teach at the high school, so my firsthand experience is there, but my sons did attend Fayetteville Public Schools, so I got to watch them grow and all the different schools that they went to. And I think Dr. Colbert is right that we are doing a really good job at assessing the individual needs of students. Do we get it 100% all the time? No, but we are constantly evaluating the needs of our students, and we continue to change in order to suit what it is that students need to be successful. So like Dr. Colbert said, we're not just a one-size-fits-all. We're not pushing every kid to go to college, but we'll get every kid who wants to go to college ready to do that. We will also offer opportunities for students who want to go directly into the workforce. We have community partnerships and work closely with the city of Fayetteville. The school board and the leaders of our district just met with them to talk about what actually does this city need as far as workforce. And we also have really strong services for our ELL and our ESL students. And I think that's something that we can be proud of, because we want our school and our school district to be inclusive. And the way that we do that is that we have to actually serve the needs of the students who come in our doors.
That's great, thank you. Why don't I pitch to Megan? Because you're in Springdale School District as well as being a state legislator.
Well, Dr. Colbert definitely wants me to clarify that I work for Fayetteville Schools, and so I want to say, first of all, that something that's going very well is I have a wonderful boss who allows me to serve in the legislature while I am a district employee. I represent Springdale. Yes. I represent Springdale right here. We're in District 89, where I live and represent in the legislature, but do work as the co-director of English as a second language for Fayetteville Schools, and after spending 9 years here in Springdale Schools. And so it's kind of funny because I'm taking professional leave from my role in Fayetteville schools, and then in the legislature, I don't serve on the education committee, so I feel a little bit like I don't know how much I'll have to contribute to this education panel when I feel a little bit disconnected on both ends. But I will say, this is my first term, and we've just wrapped up week 4 in the General Assembly. And one thing that I think is going well is that there are many of our colleagues on both sides of the aisle who are excited about talking about some of these issues that we see as priorities. One in particular is pre-K. My colleague Representative Garner is here. She's one of the co-chairs of our freshman caucus. So bipartisan group of those of us who are in our first term, and we collectively decided to work on a bipartisan effort to improve pre-K in the state of Arkansas. So that's really exciting to work across the aisle with our colleagues to focus there. I also agree that workforce readiness in all kind of facets is a priority across the aisle, and I think that comes with not only in a K-12 setting, in a CTE setting, also in higher ed settings, but I also think there's the willingness to engage in the conversation that workforce readiness happens in pre-K and in kindergarten and all the way up, and so how we ensure true workforce readiness through whether that's focusing on particular trade skills or just kind of those general soft skills that we want all of our workers to have here in Arkansas through communication and collaboration and even bilingualism as an important skill to be workforce ready, particularly in this part of the state. And so I think that I would agree that many of my colleagues in the legislature are not ready to just cut a check to many of these things. They have hesitations about making the necessary investments. But I will say some of the things that are exciting are those areas of focus that I hear over and over as areas of priority or areas of interest across party lines. So.
Great, thank you. So I'm going to shift gears a little bit and start talking about where you all see the biggest opportunities for improvement. And I don't know if Elizabeth or Elizabeth wants to start. Sorry, sometimes I bungle words, so forgive me. But but talk about where do you see opportunities that energize you all, or that you're hopeful about? Because I think it's important for us to talk about the progress that we have made, but I also think it's important for us not to be Pollyannish that we've gotten to the top of the mountain. And so where's the next leaps forward that we need to take? Where are those things?
Well, did you hear there's a bill right now to make recess longer? I think that's important. My son wants me to point him out. He's over there. He's 7. His name is Joseph. Yeah, in the orange shirt. He said, first thing I say, I should point him out and introduce him to you. This is especially important for him as a personal cause near and dear to his heart, but I think it's going to help every kid in Arkansas if we can make that happen. And I understand there are some questions about where that time will come from, because a lot of teachers feel already very constricted in their required number of minutes spent teaching each subject. Is it just going to mean a longer school day? And if so, how are we going to make that feasible? But in terms of the big picture, I think that's a really, really big step forward. And then I would say that the next big thing, besides recess being longer, is the move toward increased transparency and accountability for all schools that are funded publicly, because it's our money, right? This is the money that we're putting towards the next generation, and we expect to see results. And if we can't oversee how that money is being spent, if we can't check in on the progress, then we are, being cut out of our investment. And I think of the accountability that is just a necessary part of any public program. And I think that would be a big step forward for us in the near future.
Where do you see the gaps in transparency? Now, if I can just probe a little deeper. So what can we see and what can't we see now?
I am a blogger, and when I say I'm a blogger, that means I don't have any special access to fancy people or insider information, but what I have learned to do is use the Arkansas Freedom of Information Act to ask schools to provide their documentation, like where do your kids actually live, and how much are you paying this particular teacher? And when you raised that money for the science fair, did you actually spend it on the science fair? Stuff like that. And it turns out they actually have to answer. Even if it's embarrassing or really huge, they always have to answer. And I've learned not to be scared to even sue people if I have to enforce the Freedom of Information Act. And that is a big step forward in my own courage, but it's something that everybody can do. You don't have to be a real journalist to do this. We could all do it, and I think that's great. But there's this sort of gray area for some schools, I would say especially charter schools, and maybe even public universities, but we're here to talk K-12, where they have the money that comes in for the school's daily operating budget, and then they have a separate bank account for what's called their foundation, where they take the money from big donors, and that foundation I think should be open to public scrutiny. And a lot of schools right now are saying, you don't get to look at those numbers, that's not a real school. And I'm like, it's the same people who are running your school, it's the same people getting paid from that bank account as that are getting paid from the other. It's the same facilities, you're operating in the same facilities and you're paying for the same buildings. You should open those records to the public too. I would say that's the weakness, and I think that would be the next big step in really being able to hold schools accountable for what they're doing with our money.
Okay, that's great, thank you. I'm going to come back to the transparency piece in a minute, and we should note that the recess bill, in full disclosure, is supported by my two sons as well, and is sponsored by Representative De La Rosa from just up the road in Rogers. So we should mention that. But leaving that for a minute, Elizabeth, what do you see as where we need to take the next steps for progress?
No.
Yeah.
Sorry, I was training. Okay, an organization in Arkansas United, we support the immigrants, and we know the immigrants is increased a lot in Arkansas, and they need resources and they need service too, because they are in our schools. For us, right now, we are looking the people, we look at the programs, education programs. We are talking with the people, with the another organizations. We want partners for can support a little more, and we are in that process. We just started with that. No, it's about that. But for us, we have a laws that maybe can help. No, maybe we are sure. Eradicate the English only law for us is important. The state actions for us is important too, and eradicate the citizenship requirement for professional license, which applies to the teacher. For us, that is big important and can be really a big change in the education. I can explain it.
Well, I want to ask about the professional licensure. I know one of the challenges that we have in Arkansas is getting culturally competent teachers who look like the students that we're teaching.
Of course.
And under our current law, Dreamers can go to the university and get their teaching degree, but they cannot get the license to go. Is that am I saying this right? That's what we're trying to solve?
Of course, I can talk about that. It's that meeting. The data, even me, I'm resident here, I'm teacher, I'm lawyer, I cannot. I have passion and I want to go to the schools and I want to teach the students and share with them, and I can't because I'm resident right now. And we know the outside have a lot of professionals, not only teachers, a lot of people that really want work for this country and they can't. The DACA students, it's a challenge. They really want support this country and this state, and they cannot, only because they are not citizens. And really that is not good for nobody, because they can be support the economy and the progress of this country.
Okay, great. I want to shift for another moment well, actually, before I shift, Dr. Cole, let's ask you too, where you see the next where's the next frontier for the Fayetteville School District in terms of the progress that we could have made if you had more time, more resources, more whatever. What's next on the horizon?
Personalized learning.
Say that again?
Personalized learning.
So going deep.
Which will hit onto the additional recess and all that, which I'm kind of concerned in the sense that if we do add another 30 minutes to the day for recess, where are we going to take it from? As you know, that research is telling us that we're lagging behind in science. Do we take it from that? As you know that the math scores, they're improving. Do we take it away from math? Or do we take away from social studies? So therefore, as we look at the topic extra recess, please realize that when you and I, well, some of you, I'm a little older than most of you, went to school, we would sit behind a desk and listen to teachers teach all day long, to see. But if you go into a classroom today, you'll see kids moving around almost the entire time, from one station to the next, showing you that they are actually being engaged, they're actually being interactive with their peers, and they're able to move around and enjoy learning. And so hopefully as we look at that, we're personalized learning within the flexible classroom, we are addressing giving students additional time to do that physical activity that we hear all the time. Because I am concerned about trying to find that additional time within that day to do that extra recess. And if we were back in the, even the 80s and the early 90s when kids were sitting, to sit. But they don't sit anymore. They move constantly throughout the day. They are being active. They are engaging with their peers. They are doing physical activities throughout the day within that classroom. So therefore, I hope that we take that under consideration, that yes, they are getting that extra time, but it's different, I agree. But still, they are moving around and enjoying and learning at the same time so that teachers can have that time to really continue to improve student learning as they go along.
There are no silver bullets in education, but one of the most effective reforms we can do for leveling the achievement gap and really, though, boosting the performance of all students is quality pre-K programs and also after school and summer programs. And so Arkansas has been a little stagnant. We once led the nation in access to pre-K, and we've fallen behind there, and our quality is middling if you compare us nationally to the quality of the programming that we have. And I love all pre-K educators, so I'm not blaming them, but we need more investment. And the legislature has not, under Democrat and Republican administrations, has not been prone to really putting the kind of investment there. And on the same hand, with after-school and summer programs, the legislature found, I think it was in 2008, they created the mechanism for an after-school and summer program, but they've never, in all of these 10 years, provided any funding for that. So some school districts are doing it out of their own pots, but it's not happening at the state level. So what do we need to do as a community to bring the legislature's attention back to actually paying for these things that they all say they support?
Yeah, great question. And it's a heavy lift, to be honest. I think, I mentioned earlier that there is a good focus and interest in some of these programs, particularly pre-K, particularly after school and summer programs. I think it's hard to argue against them, especially when the research is so strong and then just the anecdotal stories we have are so strong in support. The problem comes from the unwillingness to fund the programs. I think you hit it on the head. And so while I did mention we can have some hope in the interest and the willingness to talk about it, even in my few short weeks, I've definitely come across the kind of anti-investment sentiment, that there's a real unwillingness to spend any money on things that even with public opinion so strong behind, even with research and such support of, we're unwilling to make those investments. Right now, the governor has proposed his tax plan to cut taxes for millionaires, for high income earners in the state. And I think, even some of my colleagues can see that that is not necessarily as popular as making investments in some of these programs which will pay off dividends. We can see the impact they would have for our communities and for our state, both immediately and long term. But still, I think there's there's really a lot of pushback when we say, well, let's actually think about funding these programs. And so it's hard to change people's, political ideologies, and that's a lot of where that comes from. But I would say getting in touch with your legislators does really matter. I think that reaching out and saying, especially right now, the House hasn't yet seen the budget bill, and there is a lot of negotiating happening right now because it at first failed in the Senate and then passed in the Senate with having to bring others on board who were clearly enticed by a way to kind of make concessions or to invest in things that that matter to them and that are aligned with their values. And so I think that reaching out, regardless of who your legislator is, and saying, we could give this $100 million tax cut to the wealthiest, or we could take those same dollars and invest in these things, and here's why I think we should do that. It may fall on deaf ears, but it may not. And so I would say, as a legislator, the things that are most effective are really those stories from home. So this is the impact a pre-K program has had on this particular child, or this is the way I've seen low-income kids in my neighborhood benefit from going to SOAR or going to the after-school program or the summer program in my neighborhood. I think those stories really resonate. A lot of times we see dozens of bills every day, and we can get a lot of numbers and facts and figures and kind of lose that personal touch. And so when we hear from our constituents and we hear those stories of real people and real impact in our communities, I think it really resonates. And so, again, it is a heavy lift to say, just in the current state of our legislature right now, we are, unfortunately, in my opinion, valuing tax cuts for the wealthy over investments in these programs, and I think that's just a political reality. However, now really is a time to communicate your interest, communicate your alternatives, because it hasn't passed. And there are definitely groups and individuals who are willing to hear an alternative plan. There is definitely not a done deal. I think obviously the governor was hoping it would be. He campaigned hard on those tax cuts, and even so he's had to make several adjustments because not everybody is on board. And there's a lot of, politics definitely does make strange bedfellows, and there are people who are against it because they don't go far enough, and then there are people who are against them because they really will threaten a lot of these opportunities for services for our kids and for our communities. But again, I know that's not a great answer to say. It's hard, but within the current political reality, it is, and because of that unwillingness to make those investments that we in this room, many of us in this room say, I promise this is more worth it. It's just not everyone's value, not everybody's perspective. But don't give up. Definitely reach out and continue to tell those stories and illuminate the impact that the things that you value are having in your community.
So I want to talk about this for just a minute more, and then I'm going to ask you about teacher quality, just to get you, and support that you all need. But before I go there, one of the things that lots of the public, just to piggyback on your comments about the taxes, lots of folks in the public fall asleep when it comes to tax and budget discussions. And they say, well, but I'm an education activist. I can't get into the weeds of taxes. Or I'm an environmentalist. I don't have time to pay attention to taxes. And the reality is, no matter what kind of concerns you have, at the end of the day, those concerns are either reflected in the budget or they are not. And so we all need to be budget activists. And the governor's proposal requires a 3/4 majority, which means only 25 members of the House can block it, which does mean it's kind of up for grabs. We have two, I'm just politicking here for a second. We have our two biggest concerns about the governor's proposal are, first of all, that it is heavily weighted towards the super wealthy. And Arkansas's tax system is already completely upside down. We tax the poor at almost twice the rate that we tax the wealthy. And there is a simple solution in the form of an earned income tax credit, a tax credit for working families. The other concern, though, about the governor's plan is that it is being considered before you all see a budget, or before any of the rest of us see a budget, and is being considered before we see the rest of the tax cut bills that we know are about to be filed, and those will all only take a simple majority to pass. And so we don't know what the proposal to cut the corporate income tax is, we don't know what the proposal to cut this tax and that tax, and you know every special interest group at the Capitol has got a tax cut bill in their pocket at all times. And so after the governor's plan passes, our concern is that then suddenly we have a rush to another $100, $200, $300 million in further tax cuts. And before you know it, the legislature's on a sugar high and our communities don't have what we need to pay for individualized learning plans, teacher quality, pre-K and after-school programs, ESL, et cetera, et cetera. So, sorry, get off my soapbox. I had to be a panelist for a second. Let me shift back and ask Anna, though. So another area where the research really shows that, so the biggest indicator on a student's performance in a classroom is the parent and family income. Single biggest indicator. Second biggest indicator, though, is the qualifications and quality of the teacher and the ability of that teacher to relate to students and build a relationship with students in that classroom. So again, there are no silver bullets, but this is a big reform that we can continue making on. So can you tell us what you think we need to do to be supporting quality teachers so that they're not leaving so fast, and building a stronger pipeline? We have teacher shortages.
Absolutely. I think we fund public education. So we need to prioritize our students over tax cuts. Like you said, there's one state budget. All of the things that we want to pay for come out of that. So, and this is not an isolated tax cut. So this is on top of previous tax cuts. So when you start hearing figures like $97 million is going to be taken out, that's this time, not all the other times before. And when we go back to the adequacy funding, so that the House and Senate meet together to make a recommendation to the governor on how much they need to increase spending in order for an adequate education. Adequate, not awesome, not better, just adequate. And that's only to keep doing the things that we're doing right now. It's not making any changes. Recess is awesome. Guess what? It costs money. And it's going to cost a lot of money, and where's that money going to come from? So we keep taking away from the pot, and then we keep wanting to do more things. As far as teacher quality, I mean, you know, we need to encourage our educators is what we need to do. So we have a bill that Representative Kozart put through, and it's to give teacher raises, which was in desperate need in parts of our state. So we have 269 school districts, 44 of them are using the state minimum. And so in that state minimum, teachers are not making, they're hardly making a living wage. So this bill is long overdue, but that's just going to touch those 44 school districts, but then it doesn't fund it. So there's going to be $60 million set aside, but nobody knows how that we can get access to that, and who is gonna make those rules. I think that teachers are leaving the profession, the new teachers are leaving the profession because after 3 years or 5 years, they're seeing that a lot, I think we sometimes like to look for who's to blame if we don't like an outcome, and teachers are right there, and it's really easy to point a finger in that direction, and I think that we should be hesitant to do that because there are a lot of great teachers in Arkansas, and there are a lot of great schools, and we're doing a lot of great things. But again, we've got to support them. We need the professional development. We need professional development that is not one size fits all. sit and get. So we need to tailor that to each specific level and the types of students that you teach. So if you are in a school that is 98% free and reduced, you should not be getting the same exact training as a school that is 5% free and reduced, because that's not helping anyone. It's not helping the teachers serve the students that come to their school, and it's not helping the students get the services that they need.
That's great. And, follow that. You were talking earlier a little bit about this too, but building the cultural competency of our teachers, so that if we have teachers with low-income backgrounds teaching low-income kids, we have people with rural backgrounds teaching rural kids, we have Latino parents or teachers teaching Latino kids, African American. Again, it helps that relationship between the parent or between the student and the teacher is so vitally important. So from your perch, what can we do to build this pipeline of culturally competent teachers more effectively?
Okay, I think I will back to the first point. It will permit the teachers that if not a citizen, if not can help more. I think the schools need the teachers that different cultures, and that can increase the experience. Each other can grow together. Each other can share and learn more. If that happens, I know we have teachers here like me or another DACA or Marshallese that is coming, Asians, and they can now share this experience with us. They can now go to the district and teach the students. I think that can help a lot and can help the culture. And when you help the culture with our students that are here, immigrants or not, you can get more engagement. Engagement in the parents, engagement even with the students. They are happy when they feel comfortable, they feel welcome. This teacher talk a little in my language. And that is important. And the culture really is pretty important, because I can hear what my little boy said. He was 7. And I tried he don't lose the identity. That is very important for me, for him, and for everybody that come here. And that can help to learn more about the culture, about everyone. I was clear?
I completely agree and echo all of that sentiment, how important it is to have teachers who look like our students and have their experiences. As a white woman who leads an English learner program, I understand the dynamics there and the need to have colleagues who have that experience. I would also add that middle-class white teachers need cultural competence training as well. I think it's vital that educators and policymakers alike kind of dig into what our attitudes and biases are about people of color, about people in poverty, about immigrants. I think that some of those attitudes and those sentiments, some of those kind of unspoken biases that we hold really impact the way we educate, impact the way we make policy, and impact the way we're able to narrow that achievement gap. I think it's really vital that within a system that's created, or that originally was created for and by white students and families, that we, as our schools change, that we do that difficult work of engaging in those reflective conversations. I know my colleague Kristen Graham is doing some great work on that front with some teachers at Fayetteville High School, and I think that as we talk about teacher preparation, we need to definitely consider the role and the impact of race and poverty and immigration status and sexual orientation of our students, and that we can really be responsive to those diverse experiences and diverse learning needs of our kids and their families.
100% agree, and I participate in these critical conversations, and it's very eye-opening and enlightening, and it's things that we need to be talking about. And a lot of times we do training, we do it one time, and then we say, trained. And then we go on and we never talk about it again. This is something that's so fluid that we can't ever stop talking about it. And so because of that, we don't start talking about it a lot of times. And because it's sometimes uncomfortable, but it's necessary, because absolutely, we need to have a more diverse teaching staff. 100%, everyone agrees with that, because students do learn better by people who look like them, who have the same backgrounds as them. But the reality of what we have currently is we have a lot of people who look like me. But I can still reach those students, but we also need to be able to face our own implicit bias and all of the things that, all the outside sources that are feeding us, just by watching the news or by watching television shows, films. I mean, everything that's around us is influencing us without us really realizing it. So it's a conscious effort to actually step back and look at how you're thinking or how you are maybe treating different groups not equally or not in the same way without intentionally doing it.
Elizabeth, you were in.
I was going to say two things real quick, and one is just to the law that we have statewide that requires the primary language of instruction to be English. Erisbeth was saying that's a priority for Arkansas United to change that law, but guess what? You can get that waived for your district right now, even in Fayetteville, because Don Tyson School of Innovation got that waiver. I'm just saying. If you're thinking about it, you can apply for an Act 1240 waiver tomorrow from that law, and you can use that system that the charter schools put in place and then lobbied for everybody else to your advantage. That's just one thing. And then the other thing is regarding cultural literacy and facing our bias. I think it's important to note that the state of Arkansas's school grading system right now doesn't care. They only grade the schools on reading and English and math and science. History, arts, culture, none of that matters when you're getting your funding from the state, when your school is being graded, when it's being judged failing and taken over by the state, right? And if we can't get the state's grading system to be more reflective of the whole child and of the broader educational goals, then we can aim for these things in our own schools and in our own districts, but they won't help us pay for them. You know, we won't be able to communicate to the people who are in charge of our budgets about the successes that we're finding and about the needs that we have at that individual level and the things that we're doing to change things for students who have those specific needs.
That's great. A question for the panel, and I'll let one of you just volunteer to lead a couple of sessions ago on cultural competency, we simply had a bill that made it allowable as a track for professional development for educators. Simply made cultural competency a course that a teacher could take, and we barely passed it. Senator Elliott sponsored it, and a near majority, not quite a majority, but a near majority of the Arkansas House of Representatives said, well, we don't need cultural competency, this is a waste of time. And we have an awful lot of educators that are frankly frustrated about professional development anyway. And so what can we do to build support among lawmakers and policymakers that cultural competency is really vital, and that us finding real solutions, there are some innovative solutions to professional development. And so I don't know if one of you want to go there. But
I'll
just to put you all on the spot all at once.
I'll just kind of go back to my earlier comments about telling stories. I think that it's, unfortunately, sometimes it takes actually knowing someone who is from one of these marginalized groups to change the mind or the preconceived notions that some have. And so I had a conversation with a colleague just this past week, and it was one of those conversations that was like, yeah, and he was actually a nice guy. Like, it was a big surprise that someone from a diverse community could be a decent human being. And so I think that just, again, eliminating the humanity of those who come from those marginalized groups by telling stories and making them more personal, more approachable, more relatable, I think can help break down some of those barriers and some of those stereotypes that we all have, but some more than others.
And I think we underestimate the power of our voice. So what Megan was talking about earlier, reaching out to your legislator, I mean, there are elected officials. So you have a right to tell them how you feel and what you think is important, and here's why. And what you'll hear when you talk to some of our legislators, and if you follow them on Facebook or whatever, they're saying, where are you? I'm not hearing from you. So in that case, they have to go by what they have heard. So we really need to be more proactive in putting our voice out there. So I talk about public education all the time. And my family, as soon as I come home, like, oh my gosh, this bill and this, da 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 da, and their eyes kind of roll back, but they're listening. And when they go to the polls, they're listening to my stories and they're voting that way. We need to start working together. As students, parents, educators, activists, we all need to work together to push for our students, because ultimately that's what it's about, and our future.
Right. Okay, that's great. Thank you. Dr. Kohler, I want to come back to you. When we started and you were talking about things that are going well, you mentioned that Fayetteville is making progress at closing the achievement gap. And equity and inequity is a big issue across the state. And there's too many places in Arkansas where the quality of your education is determined by the color of your skin, your family background, or the city that you were born in. Can you tell us if you were going to talk to policymakers, not that there's a few in the room, about what they could learn from Fayetteville and scale up around the state, what would you share? Maybe the rest of us can remember what you have to say and share it with some others who aren't in the room.
It actually goes back to what Hannah was saying about professional development. As we try to do professional development, we try not to just do a one-shot. We want it to be ongoing. We have what we call response to intervention, and that's both behavior and academic. And we realize that we have to have a plan in place. How can we address those academics concerns that we have with students who are not succeeding? So we have completed a 2-year study now and implemented the RTI within all of the buildings. And I think that it's very important that we understand that with that plan comes professional training with the teachers that is ongoing in order to make sure they understand how to address the needs of those particular individuals. Because what's happening, if a teacher doesn't have the skills to reach that child, their child is still not going to be successful. So therefore, we have to provide that good, solid professional development for all teachers so they can understand, how do I reach that particular learner? How does that child learn? What should I do in order to be there and meeting the needs of that particular kid? So therefore, dealing with the professional development and doing that RTI program in order to reach both the behavior as well as the academics is what I would emphasize and stress throughout the district.
And is doing that at a really high quality level free and easy?
It is not, no. It takes time, it takes money, it takes teachers out of the classrooms. I know that sometimes they say, hey, I really need to be in my classroom, but we have to realize that, hey, if we don't do that training, therefore they do not have those skills in order to meet the needs of those kids anyway. Sometimes we have to give up some of that time to do the training so they can go back and meet the needs of the students in the classroom.
And of course, Fayetteville's got a healthy tax base and a strong public education community. Are you doing that all with state support, or are you using local funds and local support to help I guess my real question is are low-income school districts across the state who are not sitting in as prominent of a place and privileged of a place as the Fayetteville School District, are they able to do what you're doing, or are they getting the necessary support from the state to do that, or are you all going beyond what the state provides to go further?
Well, again,
Just to put you totally on the spot.
I mean, you want to answer? I think it comes back to funding again. So we are fortunate in Northwest Arkansas, not just Fayetteville. This is a thriving community, and we get the majority of our income from property taxes. And so there's lots of construction, there's lots of building, lots of people moving into this area because we have a lot of things that are attractive up here. So in areas where that is not the case, the state should step in and give more funding. But I'll tell you too, the teachers that we have in our buildings, I mean, I went to school and it wasn't originally to be a teacher. I had some really grandiose ideas of what I was going to do with my French major. But then
It's worked out swimmingly.
It has, because I wouldn't change one thing. But I got married and I had a child, and then I started thinking, wow, a globetrotter translator, for the president of France might not be in my future anymore. So I went back and I got my master's in French literature, and part of the deal with the U of A is they pay for your school. In return, you have to teach intro classes. And that's where I got that bug, is because I stood up there and I thought, man, there are people in here 18 to 80 and they're doing what I'm saying and they're liking it. This is cool. But all that to say, we're educated. We're lifelong learners. I mean, teachers, you don't become a teacher because you're like, boo, learning, God, school. I was just so glad I could get out of it. And we are all trying new things all the time. That's your resource.
Right.
And we don't cost any more money than you're already paying us. So Fayetteville is really good about encouraging teacher leaders and allowing teachers to do professional development sessions. I mean, we can't always do that. That can't be all that we do, but that's a really good option for, I think, any school district.
And again, and that's where the data is showing the best professional development is peer-to-peer learning networks, and so I think that's great.
And I'll just add on a policy side, I know that there were some pilot PLC programs in some of those lower income districts, and they have really had strong results, and teachers really like them, and a lot of the legislators from some of those areas have had really great things to say about the PLC professional learning community model for professional development, having that peer-to-peer development opportunities, and those have been successful statewide.
So maybe we can scale that up some more. That would be great.
Can I just say one thing too about what Dr. Colbert was saying earlier? He was talking about RTI, and I think one of our biggest...
Just tell us all what RTI is.
It's response to intervention. So if a student is not performing academically, you go in and there are different tiers and how you intervene in order to make them successful academically. But there's also a behavioral component as well. And I think that that is one of the biggest opportunities for public schools in general. So we were talking about that earlier. The system that was created, and sometimes it's just easier to go with the flow, but really when you look at what do we do when behavior isn't on point, it tends to be punitive. So most of our answers are punishments in some form or fashion. Well, that's not working. And so we need to start looking for better ways to address the behavior but still allow these kids to succeed academically, because if they're being punished and they go into in-school suspension, ISS, or out-of-school suspension, we're taking them away from the educational experience, and that's not what we want to do. We need to reach out and connect with community members and mentor these students and allow them some sort of alternative way in order to still reach their academic success.
Yeah, that's great. Okay. So I'm going to shift back to something that came up a little bit earlier and pile that a little deeper. And Elizabeth, I'm going to pick on you. Let's talk about transparency and accountability. Every politician ever runs on transparency and accountability. And in Arkansas education, we really have, in my view, 3 different tiers of what that actually looks like. So why don't you just share a little bit about what you found from probing, and the rest of us might pick you up and join in a little bit.
Okay, I do feel like this is where I have a little bit of freedom that maybe some people on this stage don't have, because they still have to have friends when they walk out of here. Since I'm, a blogger, I get to say whatever I want, so I will say that what I've been doing with my blog has been muckraking. I think Bill introduced me as a muckraker last week to somebody. It was quite a compliment. So
I think Hellraiser was the term I used.
that's even better, right? Even better. So what I have found is I started writing my blog just sort of in my own little vacuum, and I wrote about things like, hey, did you know that ever since Act 1240 passed, and Act 1240 is the law that made it legal for all traditional public schools to apply for the same waivers from state education laws that the charter schools are getting. So you probably already know charter schools are quite unregulated because they have been granted permission to not follow particular laws by the Arkansas Department of Education, which, by the way, is not elected. That's appointed. So these people are changing the laws, and they're not elected, and they don't have to answer to us. But so the charter schools already had that, and then in 2015, Act 1240 passed, and now all traditional public schools can apply for these same waivers. So I started writing about things like, hey, did you know that if you just look at the data, there's like already almost 8,000 times that education laws have been waived, that are currently waived for schools in Arkansas. And it's every school, it's not just the charter schools. And the laws that they're waiving are not just curriculum related, we want to try a ballet class instead of gym class, or we think that our teachers should be able to take their planning periods in groups instead of individually. But they're really big things, like we think that our school should not have to provide professional development at all. Or the 54 schools in Arkansas right now that have a waiver from the teacher minimum salary law, right? We're changing the law to pay teachers more. 54 schools already don't have to follow that law. So if we change that law to make it a higher pay on paper, and we just keep waiving that law for school after school after school, it will be a meaningless law. And many of our laws are already there, just meaningless because nobody is required to follow them. So I started writing about that, and that didn't really win me any friends, but it sure won me a lot of people emailing me saying, oh my gosh, you're finally saying these things, I have so much to tell you. And so what I've been doing since then is following up on individual stories that people tell me that really are quite alarming and sad. And I can verify it using the Freedom of Information Act. I can verify the paper trails, and it's all true. It's all happening. For example, although non-disclosure agreements are technically unenforceable if it's a public entity who makes you sign one, right? And that was in the news, I think, recently with the Trump administration's campaign staff that are now working in the White House. They're technically unenforceable for public employees. There are schools that make their teachers sign non-disclosure agreements as part of their regular daily operations, and especially if teachers leave, right? And especially if teachers leave after trying to file any sort of whistleblower complaints, because these schools are trying to protect their image. It's not Fayetteville.
Just to be clear.
They're trying to protect their image rather than serve their students, right? They're the people who are closest to these students who are struggling the hardest and are facing things like suicide attempts, like the most violent and sad things that happen in the ways that we fail our children, because that's a real thing. We could be doing better as grown-ups. But when that happens, it should be that the community responds to help the family, not to silence everybody who would want to talk about it. And I think that level of hiding information and silencing conversation is sinister. And I think I don't know, I lost track of my question. You asked the levels of transparency.
Let me riff for a minute, and then we'll come back, because I'll give you a minute to gather your
Right.
thoughts. So one thing that I think is important about this, I call it waiver mania. In the 2000s, again, we've talked already about we have one of the fastest improving education systems in country. That's not because we passed a bunch of burdensome regulations that some of the privatizers would tell you that our laws are, but they are laws, they are standards, and they were hard-fought standards to raise teacher qualifications, to improve the curriculum, to raise teacher salary. And I saw an advertisement in the Little Rock newspaper for a charter school advertising for a teacher, and it said college degree preferred. And I almost fell out of my chair. And now those waivers that the charter schools have done are being applied across the board. Every school district in Arkansas is in the district of at least one charter school, which is the Virtual Academy. And so with that retreat from standards, the other problem with the waivers is that there's no regulatory authority, rulemaking authority for the Department of Ed. So they have no authority to take one back. They have no authority to put...
There's not even a process for it.
There's not even a process for it. The law was written, they can say yes, they can say no, that's it. They can't put any qualifications on it. And school after school after school, I don't know if Fayetteville is one of those schools, but school after school after school has said, we want to waive everything. And the board will say, well, why? And I've seen superintendent after superintendent stand there and say, well, I'm not sure yet, but I just want the flexibility. And so with that going on, you all as educators, are you not concerned that we're retreating from those standards that we fought so hard, really for generations?
And they're meant to be minimum standards.
So what do we do to get lawmakers thinking? Because again, this has all been done by the privatizers, by charter school folks and by folks who say that we want vouchers, and they're saying, well, we need to give education controlled by educators is the problem. The teachers are the problem, and the standards are the problem. And we need to give flexibility for innovation, and so anything goes. And there's got to be some middle ground between being locked into a state system that maybe sometimes doesn't work and anything goes. So how do we navigate this as a community?
I mean, that's a really good question, and I'm not sure that I have the map to navigate that, but you're right.
I wish you did.
I wish I did too.
I have $20 in my wallet. I'm willing to pay.
Right? Well, first of all, we have to work together. Okay, so if all of us have a common goal of supporting public education and making sure that it means something when you graduate from our schools, it's important that all of our students have access to it, because one of the things we haven't talked about yet is who really has access to the private charters and private schools and all of these different things with vouchers and scholarships and things that the terminology that they're using. It's not that everybody has that choice. But when we come back to waivers, really all of these standards and everything that we do in schools has been touched in some way by an elected official. So people like to say, well, you know, education isn't political. Yeah, thank you, ma'am. It is. I mean, you're right, it shouldn't be, but almost everything that we do in our classrooms and in our school districts, it has been decided by either school board members or our representatives and our senators. And again, we are so fortunate in Northwest Arkansas to have people like Representative Godfrey and Senator Craig Leddy and all of the people that we have. Miss Garner as well. Sorry. When I start talking, sometimes I'm like, what is her name? I know her name, but I called her Denise earlier, and I was like, don't call her Denise. Anyway, I'm so sorry. I'm getting flustered because we were talking about waivers. But we're lucky because they value public education and they want to listen to us. That is not the case for all of our representatives and legislators. It's very eye-opening if you ever go to the Capitol. Now's a good time, because it's the General Assembly, and it's every 2 years. So if you miss your chance now, you're gonna wait a while. But when you go in and you sit in the House Education Committee or the Senate Education Committee, it's interesting to hear what you hear, because you're thinking, wait, that doesn't sound good. Why are they presenting that? Why is no one saying anything against it? And so we need to be aware that not everybody is pro-public education. And a lot of those people have the power to make the rules for us to follow. So when they start talking about like grading, I'm so glad you said that. One of the biggest data points, and it's my two least favorite words stuck together, graduation rate. Thank you. Because graduation rate, do we want students to graduate? Of course we do. That's why we're there. But that being one of these factors that you look at the percentage of kids that are graduating and the way that they figure it, so if a kid gets their GED, they don't technically graduate. Okay, so if they have to go an extra year, they didn't technically graduate. But yes, they did. They just didn't do it the way you wanted them to do it. And so these type things really hamper our ability to serve all of our students. And the legislature decided on these things. They decide, and the ADE decides on how we're graded. They're making those decisions. And you're right, they are appointed, and they're appointed for a very long time. But that doesn't mean we can't voice our concerns. And it is very scary because some of the things that are meant to protect our students and our educators, like the Teacher Fair Dismissal Act. So if that is waived,
I was wondering if that was going to come up.
Dr. Colbert could just say, good job at the farm, you're fired. He's not going to do that. But there's no due process. There's no longer any due process. They could waive the individual planning time to where teachers are no longer able to plan lessons or work with other teachers in PLCs. They have to do whatever it is that the administrator wants them to do. I mean, these are scary prospects, and I think this goes back to why are teachers leaving?
Right.
Because it feels sometimes like a desperate situation. But I don't think it is. I think that, again, everyone who's here has some sort of vested interest in public education, and we need to talk to each other, and we need to have common language. And then we need to be saying the same things to all of the legislators, and we need to be reaching out not just to our own, but the people that we know who live in those areas, for the people that we know don't particularly care for public education. And we need to say, you need, as their constituent, you need to reach out to them and say, we need to stop the madness.
Right. Representative Godfrey, I saw you issue.
Sure. I just wanted to say, please elect more colleagues for me who are supportive of public education, please. That's overly simplistic, but I think, everything.
Sometimes it's that simple.
It is, and honestly, and I'll say, I won by a very slim margin in a district that hasn't elected a Democrat in decades. And one thing that really resonated with folks who tend to vote more conservative was the fact that I am a public educator. They liked that. They liked my experience there. They agree that schools should be funded and prioritized and teachers should be paid and taken care of. And so I think it is an issue that has political capital, even in kind of a hyper-partisan political environment. And so it has to be political, and we have to support candidates financially, knocking on doors, making phone calls. We absolutely have to. I see, Andrea is here, and she's a public educator, elected official, and I think that she can speak to that as well, that people really do value the experience of public educators. And, I would say a lot of times, we have people who are down in the legislature who are making policies about education and have never been in a classroom, and even across party lines, that resonated. And so I would say, please, as we approach 2020, please think about becoming a candidate who supports public education or supporting those who do, especially educators. And I think that, for me, it was a little bit of a career trajectory to say, I've been in public education my whole career, I love it. But the reasons I'm an educator are also the reasons I wanted to pursue becoming, a state representative and becoming a policymaker, because the work we do now in the legislature is vital to what we do day to day in the classroom. So I would just definitely say, please continue to support pro-public ed candidates or become one.
So coming back to this accountability and transparency thing, Dr. Colbert, in Fayetteville, you guys have to take every student that appears, right? You don't get to pick and choose who you're going to educate today and who's just too much trouble.
That is correct.
Yeah, right.
Yes.
And so that presents some challenges because you have a whole wide, imagine, array of abilities and backgrounds and people needing some different kinds of special supports.
And that is part of our mission statement, is that we are going to educate all students regardless of their background and their ability. And transparency, as you was talking about certain things that's been hidden, by law, we have to publish everything on the website. It shows the budget, shows you how much we pay teachers, and also we try to make sure that we are transparent, that anyone can go onto the Fayetteville Public Schools website and see all of the expenditures that we spend is there, and that's how we remain transparent. And as we continue to look at educating all students, we do go back to our RTI program, that we create that plan that we can meet the needs of every student. So therefore, when you come to a public school, we don't say you can't come to us. We say, yes, you're a part of us, and we're going to take care of you. That's what we stand for. We stand for making sure that we educate every kid, regardless of who they are, when they come to those doors, and we respect that.
Thank you. But
is it easy? No, it's not.
I think we all know it's not easy. So in the education system, though, we have a lot of now public dollars. Well, and this could be for Elizabeth. You could maybe answer this too. I don't, but we have a lot of public dollars going to quasi-private or sometimes fully private entities, either through vouchers or charter schools, who are hiding, shielding from FOIA and from the public who's on the board, how they selected the students that they're educating. And so you can look at a number of, for example, charter schools, and their student bodies demographically could not have happened randomly. Just, it was the weirdest coin flip exercise I have ever seen, repeated year after year after year, if that was random. And yet we can't pry back the veil to see what's really going on there in the way that we can pry into your business. And so maybe Elizabeth, you got the mic. Do you want to speak about what do we need to do to sort of level the playing field so that public dollars bring with it public transparency and public accountability?
Okay, one thing that I always used to think when I was a professional violinist and then briefly when I was a charter school teacher was that the Arkansas Department of Education probably checked. When school districts post on their state required information portion of their websites, post who their employees are, I thought there was probably some sort of system where the Department of Education would double check and make sure those were really the people working at the school. But that's not true, because people can hide schools, charter schools especially, can hide who's working there by paying them out of their foundation accounts and not going through background checks, or calling those people volunteers or calling them vendors. They get past the Department of Education's attempts to double check these things. And when they do report things, for example, disciplinary policies like suspending or expelling students based on behavior problems or anything else, you're supposed to report that to the Department of Education, and the Department of Education is supposed to collect that data and compare and look for schools that are doing wacky things or harmful things based on the data, but there's nobody checking. Nobody comes to your school and says, wait, let me check and see if anybody is actually currently suspended. And parents are scared to talk about it because if you complain, and teachers can't talk either, if you complain, you'll get fired. If you complain, you'll get expelled. And these are the charter schools that can, but traditional school districts can't expel you for talking. And so there becomes this disparity of secrecy and fear silencing the people who ought to know, and then the state level doesn't check, so the people with authority, like the State Board of Education has subpoena power. They could subpoena the daily attendance records of the school and check to see if those match the students who got into the lottery, but they never check. They don't check, they just take the school's word for it. They might say, well, you have to have your enrollment lottery be on video or open to the public, but if strange things happen and the State Board of Education hears about it, They like wait for somebody to volunteer to come up and be the tribute, to be the person who speaks out, to be the whistleblower who's not protected by the Teacher Fair Dismissal Act, to tell them about it. And if nobody does, they don't subpoena it. It doesn't get followed up. So first, schools hide things and they lie, not you, Fayetteville. Charter schools especially. And then the state doesn't check. And then parents and teachers are scared to speak because either we're not members of the union or the union can't protect teachers who have no rights, or because it's just this culture of philanthropy and believing that the richest people among us have our best interests at heart, which I don't think is something that we can back up. And I think we need to, I think we need to have control over our own public schools, admit that they're not perfect, but then fix them ourselves and not sell them to the people who think that they have a better way. I think we need to have the better way.
And again, there's an awful lot of data to lead us to the better way is what the only thing I would add to that. So I have 100 more questions on my sheet here, but we're passing out cards so you all can start funneling up your questions. And so while you're thinking about the questions you'd like to ask the panel, so far, is conversation going okay? I think it's going okay.
We should let them have a recess.
Yeah, we should definitely let you have a recess. I actually mentioned that when we made the agenda, but this is what it is. Where would we put that? So the one question I'm going to ask, we're waiting for more to come in from the audience that we haven't really gotten to, is around parent and community engagement. Again, following the data, some of the things that we know are that simply a family being involved in their school as an advocate for their child, whether they win a single thing they're advocating for or not, just them simply showing up and being involved improves the child's outcomes in that school. Prove it. And there's a lot of other reasons to do parent-community engagement as well. So again, those of you that are operating in this space, either in the immigrant community or as a blogger or as educators, as lawmakers, what can we do to bring more family and community engagement into the school so we're as passionate about what's happening with our school policy as we are about all the other things in our lives? Not to ask any loaded questions up here.
Okay, yes, I have something to say. It's like, back one more time about this law, the English only. We think that English only is like a wall for family engagement. I was surprised when I came here, they say, where are the parents? And when I talk in some schools and with the people, we know that each schools have the program, engagement family program, right? And when I think, when I was talking about, what is your program? We have interpreters. That's it. That is only one way. It's not communication. Okay, thank you for that. Because we have interpreters, but that is it's not enough. That is not engagement. We don't see the parents there. We don't see the parents like a talk with the teacher. We have this idea. We can work for the school. We can do this event for maybe get some for the kids, or we do this in the culture. When I come here, say, where is the festival for Mother's Day? And the people engage a lot. And in Mexico, the family engagement is for that event. And that increases the culture and the family engagement. And I know the education, the system, the district is really amazing. I appreciate when I come here. I know these have a big challenges because it's not like my country. My country, you're teaching only Spanish. And here is with another languages, and I know it's a big deal for the teachers. I'm a teacher, and I say, how you can? And really I appreciate that. And we appreciate that because you have big challenge. But about the family engagement, if we eradicate that law, I think the parents can feel comfortable and welcoming, and can work more for the schools. And you know what? Any system is perfect, but the quality in education, we need three things: school, parents, and students. It's necessary, the three of us, and work together.
The only thing I would add there along the same lines is that sometimes both educators and policymakers, we tend to assume we know best. We tend to assume, oh, well, this is what parents want, and this is what parents need, this is what families do or don't want or will or won't come to. I just want to say it's super important that we're listening to those families, that we want to engage and learning from them. I think that's true for making policy as well, that we don't assume that we know best when it comes to how we solve problems of poverty or problems of public schools without investing time in hearing from those who are actually impacted and affected. So just making sure that we're listening and reaching out and not assuming we know best.
That's great, thank you. So some audience questions. So one is, what can we do to start or increase more language immersion classes and bilingual education in the schools? Is that happening anywhere in Northwest Arkansas, or is it? And how, if it is, how could we expand it? Or if it's not happening, what do we need to do to? And I'm not sure who wants to.
I can speak to that a little bit. So right now there is actually a state law prohibiting that. Unfortunately, there's an English-only law requiring English to be the only language of instruction. We could probably participate in waiver mania and get a waiver, but right now there is a state law prohibiting bilingual or dual immersion instructional programs. I do have a draft of a bill to change that. So we'll see how that shakes out. It will be a heavy lift. I'm thinking about, again, just some of the challenges political realities of this legislature, but that's part of my campaign, something I ran on, something that I, both in my professional work and I'm doing a PhD in ESL curriculum, the research supports that students learn best with native language support. And so you can, I think it's through policy or waivers, but right now there's not a good model for those types of instructional programs because of the law prohibiting them. So.
Okay, thank you. Another question is, and I've been actually I was part of a big conversation yesterday about this, is the mental health crisis in our schools, and the Safety Commission had some recommendations about dealing with mental health, as well as arming some school personnel. But on the mental health side, there's a lot of concern that they're not going to really address the crisis with enough resources. They're going to just sort of move things around. They're going to have school counselors who aren't really mental health experts to play some of those roles. And so again, those of you all who are educators, again, I think you probably won't speak from your own experiences, but what can we do to address the mental health crisis that you see with your student population? And do you have any suggestions for how the state might approach that?
That's a big question. So first of all, I don't think that the mental health crisis, it falls on any one particular group of people or individual that's in the school. I think that we do have to rely on our counselors because that's who we have. I think it could come back to some training. Most teachers don't have a background in mental health, and so I don't know what I'm looking for. And if I don't know what I'm looking for, then I don't know how to tell anybody that there might be something going on here. So I think that's part of it. Because we're with the kids a lot. And so I think that you can start to, you recognize things if you know what you're looking for. So that's one thing. I think also that there are schools that don't have counselors.
Right.
That's a shame. That's an absolute shame. I think that, we have Ozark guidance counselors at Fayetteville High School. I believe we have one. for 3,000 students. One.
And are they doing testing and other duties as well, or are they?
No, they're not doing testing or other duties.
Counselors in many districts are.
Oh, counselors. Well, not the OGC counselor, but like the regular school counselors are oftentimes, well, I mean, they have a lot of roles. They have to be an academic advisor, so making sure that transcripts and the students are passing everything. But they also are there for any time a student needs to talk about a specific issue or something that's going on in their family. So yeah, they're already spread pretty thin. But again, before you answer, Carol, it comes back to funding. These people cost money. Good programs cost money. You've made the reference to there is no one silver bullet. Well, regardless of which one that we choose, it's gonna cost money. So if you want to do it right, you have to pay for it.
Yes, and I was just going to address we have two things. We have our school guidance counselors, and then Ozark Guidance provides our school-based counselors, which are wonderful. And she is a real jewel. And before there were two, I don't know if there's, but anyway, my grandson utilizes that service, and that's a really good example of allowing the school-based counselors from Ozark Guidance to be in the school, because it's hard to see someone outside the clinic and be isolated. So we definitely need funding for more of that coming from, the Ozark Guidance source and the schools. But that's a really good program.
I would also like to say the anecdote that I mentioned with the student who tried to commit suicide, that he had been seen 12 times by his school counselor, and they never once contacted his family. I think it comes back to the triangle of people that we need to have involved as well. It's not just the school faculty, but it's also the parents and the children. And I think strengthening those connections and communication links will help as well. But I think it's also worth noting that there's a huge, I don't think it's on purpose, but I think there's an incentive for schools not to identify students who have special needs. Because when you have a student who needs more, that means suddenly you have to start paying more to educate them. And so I think even though the teachers and the administrators are well-intentioned, the fact that we model the funding system for our public schools on achievement, test scores, standardized test scores, that we send our money where the successful students are, is a disincentive to serve the students who really need us. And I think that, like I found out today, and this is kind of sad because I found out from a person who was scared to come. She works in a charter school and doesn't want to get fired for participating in something like this. But I found out today that there's a 10% threshold above which, so if you identify 10% or more of your students as needing 504 accommodations, that the Arkansas Department of Education will come to your school and say, what are you doing? Are you just trying to get out of having to test them? Rather than saying, who are you serving and what can we do to help? Right? And I think on the state level, rather than just throwing money at, of course we have to throw money at it, but not just that, we have to stop taking money away from the schools that are doing the hardest jobs and giving it to the schools that have the easiest job to do.
And I think, just speaking for Every Education Act, we need to throw money at proven solutions that are accountable for results. I'm going to shift gears again for just a moment. We had a couple of questions related to the conversation we've had around cultural competency. And one of the questions was, how does serving students who are from the GLBT community, how does that fit into the way that you're approaching cultural competency in the school? And then the second, which is a little bit different, is really more around for kids of color who are targeted more for disciplinary action and how that fuels the school to prison pipeline. And so, so a few specifics around this cultural competency question. What can we do to sort of dismantle and change our discipline policies so we're not feeding that pipeline? And then also, what are we doing, or what should we be doing to serve GLBT students more effectively? Anyone?
Do you want to? Okay.
Bueller?
Well, so we can talk about the discipline first. I think it goes back to what I said earlier. We need to be better at developing other reactions to behavior that impedes the learning of other students. So it doesn't always have to be punitive. So I think that that's one way. Again, it's about having the critical conversations. So I think that a lot of teachers are desperate for having those conversations and being able to talk to their colleagues. But I also think that we wrongly make the assumption that students don't want to talk about it. And they do. And if you have a relationship with your students, they will give you exactly the information that you need. And in speaking to the LGBTQ, that's a perfect example. So because it's, if when you have a student who starts the year as a Sarah and ends the year as Adam, there's a learning curve there for everyone involved. And there is no handbook on how you deal with it. And I think that you have to sometimes take the guidance from the students, and then that will get you through, and just be as sensitive and open to it as possible. And it's okay to admit, I don't know what I'm doing here, so I'd like you to give me guidance on like what pronoun would you like to use and things like that.
It also comes back to the representation thing, where we say we want our students to have teachers they can identify with. We still live in a state where it's legal to not hire or to fire a teacher for their sexual identity. And particularly if we're taking away the Teacher Fair Dismissal Act, and LGBTQ teachers already are fireable just for that, we're going to have less and less representation in schools. And I think that does nothing to serve these kids with this identity. But it's sort of self-selecting, because adults who would otherwise want to teach kids already know. They know that they're not welcome around other people's kids. There's a fear. And I think as a community, the more that we can do to make adults feel welcome in schools, even, or libraries, because I'm thinking of drag queen story time, the more that we can do to welcome a diverse community of adults in our schools, I think the better we'll be able to serve the kids.
That's really great. We have a few questions, so I'm going to see if I can get to a couple more, and if we could keep our answers as short but meaningful as possible. So one, we haven't talked at all today about wraparound services. And we have a lot of low-income students. Statewide, there's a perception that Northwest Arkansas has no low-income students, but those of you that work here know that that's not true. But where should we be focusing our priorities on wraparound services, particularly to help low-income students or students who are otherwise vulnerable for different reasons?
Well, one thing that begins with the health services and providing, because in Fayetteville we have a health clinic where parents can take advantage of, because we really need to make sure that all the kids are healthy and all, and also making sure that we provide different types of food services for them, because we know some of our kids go without a healthy meal. And so within Fayetteville this past holiday, we tried to do an after-school feeding program, making sure that every student during that holiday had the opportunity to go and get a healthy meal. So we believe in making sure that those students are healthy so that they can feel good, and when they come to us, we can educate them, because we know if a child is hungry, if a child is sick, we know that they're going to have a hard time learning in the classroom. So we want to try to address the whole child, and those are two of the big areas that we're trying to address as we continue to meet the needs of all the students in the district.
That's great. That's great. The state has made some significant progress on health and nutrition, but we have more to go. Another question from you guys have a lot of questions, which is great. What can we be doing in this era of testing and such an emphasis on testing to be teaching critical thought skills and be teaching critical thinking that might not be measured on a bubble test? Someone said is not measured by a bubble test.
I probably should pass this on because the first thought that came to my mind was follow the money.
Oh my God. Okay, I was thinking the same thing, but I'm just going to throw something else out there. Use other tests. I mean, we don't have to do the bubble thing. We could measure it in other ways, and there are lots of, not just other states doing things differently to comply with the federal law, but other countries that don't test their kids at all, other countries that measure completely different things that are unrelated to standardized test scores. And self-evaluation is huge. I think maybe not just self-evaluation by the faculty, but what about if we include the kids in the testing process, in the measurement process? Because I think then you're teaching them to think critically by asking them to do the job of thinking critically, and maybe that would help too. It just seems like we've never really asked these questions.
Dr. Colbert, what percentage of the school year for you, or what percentage of your all's budget is consumed by testing? I know my children are in Laura School District. I have a kindergartner and a second grader. They're kindergarten and second grade, and they're tested 5 times a year, which to me as a parent seems excessive. And I'm not sure what the test results even mean, frankly. I mean, they tell us what they mean, but I'm not sure I trust them. Could you just speak to the value that you find from that regime and how much resources it consumes versus where else you might put those resources?
Well, if you utilize testing, the reason why it was created is to assess the student, to see what that child is, and then that is going to help the teacher prepare the lessons and meeting the needs of those students. So therefore, we want to make sure we're utilizing the results correctly. And so we try to make sure that once those results come back, we're going to put it in the hands of the principals, put it in the hands of the teachers, analyze it and see where are the weak spots in the curriculum so we can address those. So if we do it that way, we are doing the student justice, and because we've taken those results and utilizing those results and making sure that we are trying to improve the instruction and meeting the needs of those students.
Okay. There's a stack of more questions I want to ask. We're running short on time, so I'm going to just focus on 2 quick things here. This says, for Megan, how can we best encourage young women in our schools to make plans in their lives to serve? Because we do not have enough representation of women in our elected legislature. And you seem like the perfect person to ask this question.
Yeah, I actually, it was this weekend 1 year ago that I decided to run for office, and one of my biggest hang-ups was the fact that I love my job. I love the work I do. I love being an educator, and it felt like it would be a mismatch. Fortunately, on the actual job side, it wasn't. My district has been obviously very supportive all throughout the campaign, and then now during the legislative session. And so that's been a huge benefit. But part of my willingness to even come and ask was having friends and family around me who said, you can do this and you should do this. And so I would definitely start asking and keep asking. I said no several times and didn't see it as a reality, but I had friends who were encouraging because they kind of closed that gap for me, where I saw it as, incompatible, they said, no, the reason you love education is exactly the reason you should serve. The reason you got into teaching in the first place to advocate for marginalized communities, to elevate others' voices, to provide and promote opportunities, particularly for low-income students, for students of color, for immigrant students. That's exactly the voice we need in public office. And so it was those friends who were able to encourage me in that and to kind of illuminate the compatibility there, who really helped me to make it happen. And then in the actual, coming and saying, hey, I want to do this crazy thing, can I still have my job? I think it was really coming in with a very positive and solutions-oriented perspective to say, I think we can make this work. I think this is going to be good for everybody. This is going to be good for kids. It's going to be good for the district. It's going to be good, for me and my personal and professional growth, and it's something that I'm interested in pursuing. And so, because I was able to kind of visualize it for myself and see this is something I can and should and want to do, I was better able to communicate that. And so, it's a challenge, of course. The back and forth to Little Rock is starting to get exhausting. I'm on unpaid leave right now, and I'm missing out on work and miss it. But at the same time, the benefits of being able to bring those voices from my community, those experiences I've had as a classroom teacher, as a leader at the district level, those are invaluable, and those are voices and experiences that are not always sitting at the table. And so I would say just continue to make it a reality, to brainstorm and daydream alongside those friends, or if it's you who's thinking about doing it, just think about how it could happen instead of why it shouldn't or couldn't, and then make it a reality for yourself. And I'm happy to talk to any of you, more individually about it, but it definitely was not a career-long ambition, and it wasn't an easy decision to make, because I love what I do. I love public education, but I think seeing how they were compatible and it's just an extension of my values is what really sold it to me.
All right, one thing that I will say is we work with a lot at the legislature on pushing policy agendas of our members, and being a legislator is an incredibly difficult, running for office is an incredibly difficult job, and even folks who I don't agree with on anything, I respect the daylights out of the effort they put in to be there, and they need your support. They need to hear from you when they do well as when they're not doing well. So please, let's give. And we need, the legislature is not nearly as diverse as it should be, gender-wise, ethnically, racially, professionally. We need more teachers, we need more healthcare professionals. It's too monolithic, and it's a reason why one of the reasons why our policies in the state in many areas are as skewed as they are. On that note, Denise, one of the questions was if you would give us a couple of minutes, I'm putting the couple of minutes constraint on, of just reaction to the committee and what you see coming through the education committee, since you actually serve on the education committee. But to give you a minute to prepare. Before we do that, Nick Cartwright from our staff is going to come up and just talk about, real quickly, some of the things coming up for the legislature. I'd like everybody to give our panel one more big hand. They've been great. I've enjoyed the conversation. I hope you all enjoyed the conversation as well. And our organization is basically here to help grassroots citizens across the state get involved and make a difference. So if there's anything we can do to help you or your community be a part of making change in the state, don't hesitate to let us know. And with that, Nick Cartwright, thank you.
Hey everybody, so I just want to do one thing real quick. If you are an administrator, a teacher, or someone who works in a public school, will you please stand or raise your hand? Thank you for what you do every day for our kids. I know that we don't tell you that enough. So there's a couple things that I want to bring your attention. So at the back at our table at Citizens First Congress, we have a legislative directory. And so this little lovely booklet will tell you about every legislator, their contact information. It will tell you what committees they serve on. It'll give you the outline of every committee, what cities they represent, and how to get in contact with them. So this is a very useful tool. I know we've talked a lot about contacting your legislators today, so please pick one of those up. We don't want to take any home. We at Citizens First Congress also read all 2,000 plus bills, and we monitor them very closely throughout the session. So we want you guys to go to our website, citizensfirst.org, and please sign up for our action alerts. We send out weekly updates, and we also send out when there's events or special things going on and when you need to take action and contact your legislators. So please go sign up for those. And please also, at the back of the room, as you've seen already, there are several tables from today's sponsors. Please check them out. I know they're doing a lot of things around education as well. And finally, on March 19th, so I think a lot of the time in education we don't empower our students enough. And so one of the things that we want to help do is bring out their voices more. And so on March 19th, we're hosting a Youth Advocacy Day at the Capitol. That's during spring break, so if your kids or anybody you may know might be interested, just check out our website and we'll have information on that. And I think that's all I have.
And I forgot to mention, there are a few key Northwest Arkansas members of the Senate and the House Education Committee. So just to tell you who they are so you can be talking to them. Here in Northwest Arkansas, of course you have Denise Garner on the Education Committee, and I'm hoping you're going to come up next. And then we also have Janet De La Rosa up in Rogers, who's on the Education Committee and been a key voice on many public education issues. Jim Dotson in Bentonville, and I'm forgetting. Well, he's on the Senate Committee and I've spoken on the House. One more? What did I forget? Oh, there, Grant Hodges, of course, also from Rogers. And then Trent Jim Hendren on the Senate Committee, and also Lance Eads. And Senator Eads is really a key moderate voice on the Senate Education Committee. He has been fair and listened to all sides, and it's really important for him to hear your voices, particularly here in Springdale. Let's hear it for Denise Garner, Representative Denise Garner.
Well, I'm thrilled to be here, and I've learned so much just sitting here. I am a public health advocate, and certainly that's what my career has been involved with. And so I thought that physicians and nurses used a lot of acronyms, but until I got on the education committee, I think you guys win, and you certainly win. I am not a teacher, but I grew up with teachers, like my grandparents, my parents, my spouse's parents, my sisters, they're all teachers. And I just went a little bit different direction. I am the black sheep, and so I went a little bit different direction in health education. And so I have been a public education supporter all my life. Our kids went to public school. They've done extremely well. And, you know, they've had their challenges, and the school had their challenges with them. And they even 30 years ago took the time to make sure that they had what they needed in their personal development. And so I have to thank Fayetteville Schools for that. I've been involved in a volunteer with public schools for a long, long time, and a huge advocate. The Public Education Committee is extremely difficult. Just learning the budget and the matrix system has been eye-opening. I didn't have any idea how much power the governor has. We can suggest things, but the governor has control. I am excited to say that we do have some power, even in a super minority, over some of these tax-related issues. So we need to hear what you think about taxes. We are looking at some things that may be a way to work out some compromises with the tax breaks. So we'd love to hear that. Some of the things that are coming up, there are a lot of unfunded mandates, and that's one of the most frustrating things for me, because I know these things would be great in the school system, but we're not paying for them, and where are these things going to happen and how are we going to pay for them? So bullying is one that has come up again. Journalism classes for high school with some of the First Amendment rights questions. You know, one of the things that I figured out pretty quickly is that things that I think are fairly benign, one of the first acts that came, or one of the first bills that came across the Education Committee was a bill to allow students to be able to put on sunscreen when they go out for track meets or something like that. Well, as a public health worker, I thought that was great. I mean, we want our kids to have, to be able to put sunscreen on, and sunscreen is a medication, so that in the school system, a medication has to be given by a nurse. So all this bill was trying to do was to allow kids to be able to put on their own sunscreen when they go outside to play. Well, I learned very quickly that that's a huge issue, because in the lower levels, then it becomes, do the teachers put it on? Are they liable for sunburn if the kids don't get it on? If, you know, just all of these kinds of things, if they happen to touch a student in a place where they shouldn't touch, is that a problem? I mean, there's just all of these things. So it's every bill that comes across, we have to think about the way it affects education. And so all of that's to say is that I'm going to depend on you guys so much to be talking about those kinds of things. We have K-12, pre-K and K-12. We've got higher ed, and so we have all the university education issues, and we have career education. So all of those things come across our desk, and we're going to depend on you guys to keep us focused on the things that are important for each individual committee and subcommittee. And so far, everybody's been great. I've called to ask questions, and I've been given answers. I've had emails, I've had text messages, even during committee meetings, and you can watch those committee meetings now online. So you can watch those committee meetings. You can text me in the middle of a vote if you want to and say, ask this question. And I've done it before, and I will continue to do that. There are a couple of things Anna talked about, the word individual, taking that word individual out of the planning session. I am very interested in wraparound services. My sister teaches at Ramey. She has some of those kids that she is not only feeding, but counseling and clothing and then trying to teach them. So I'm extremely interested in how we can work with some of those other efforts. But again, we've got to fund them. And so we may be trying in the superminority to pass some bills that we know they're not gonna pass, they're not gonna make it. But it gives us an opportunity to talk to the public, to educate the public about what's going on, and you better believe I read every bit of your blog, so thank you very much for that. Yeah. So, I mean, we've got to get our education from everywhere. We've got to educate other people about what's going on, and we've got to make sure that the governor and his staff hear your concerns about what's happening in education and the fact that we're not even funding adequate education, as Anna said. We have got to make sure that we have superior education. That's what's going to turn our state from number 49 to number 1. So thank you very much for being here. Thank you guys. I've learned so much, and anything that I can do to help, call me.
Well, I'm just so grateful for y'all to be here. We went a little over time, but I think it was well worth it. I am really thrilled with our panel and with our discussion. I wanted to make announcements. League of Women Voters has a couple events. Patty Williams, Black Lives Matter, and Compassion Fayetteville will have a presentation February 28th, and they said location to be announced, so you can keep posted. We put a lot on the internet. March 28th, Sybil Jordan Hampton is addressing us, and so just save those dates. And if you're interested in getting the League of Women Voters newsletter, there's a table back there you can sign up. And just in closing, I want to say I am so thrilled again that we've had this conversation, and I think what Anna said is real important, that we find our voice, we use our voice, and we go back and we get really engaged with our local school boards and our city planners and city boards, and as well as the state. And Elizabeth, I thank you so much, and I think she had a lot of good things. And one thing I remember seeing that triangle the whole time. I've been retired for about 5 years, but you know, parents, teachers, you know, and students, you know, we're all there together, and we've got to be equal partners. So let's go get involved locally, and I know we'll talk again, and we've connected the dots. And thank you so much. Oh, and I got tons of refreshments, so please stop by the refreshment table, get a cookie, get some crackers, get some apple juice. Okay, thank you.